The Bible Belt. It's a term all of you know unless you aren't blessed enough to be from the South. From Texas to Virginia, you see the highest concentration of Christian religious activism in the U.S. The most recent Gallup poll says that around 76% of Americans consider themselves to be Christian. According to U.S. Religion's Landscape Survey, over 50% of Southerners polled say they are evangelical Christians. Furthermore, ABC News says that nearly half of all Southerners attend church weekly. From that fact, one can also deduct that half of Southerners listen to the advice of a pastor or spiritual leader on a regular basis. But how much political and community influence do these pastors have? And which pastors are those most involved? The historical consensus is that clergymen continue to be influential in community politics, but they were especially active throughout the period of segregation in the U.S. It goes without saying that the most influential clergymen were African American. It would be interesting to discover whether the old trend continues, or if white pastors have taken some of the political spotlight. As we learned by reading the book Black and Selma, African American pastors were some of the most influential political movers and shakers during the period of intense segregation in the U.S. Although few blacks could vote, more often than not, the pastor's political alignment was well known. Some pastors took the more appeasing road to get what they want and have some influence like Jemison, but it took more charismatic men like Ralph David Abernathy and Martin Luther King Jr. to lead the charge for African American civil rights. After attending a service at the all-black Franklin Avenue Baptist Church in Baton Rouge, I can honestly see why black pastors have so much influence. When I walked in, I had never felt so welcomed. The pastor himself came and hugged me along with a few of the deacons. They even offered me a seat on the second row, directly behind the deacons. Despite being the only white in an all-black service, I felt right at home. This sense of community is exactly why black church members listen to the advice of their minister. I got a chance to interview Pastor Emmanuel Piggy, but unfortunately he had very little experience since he had only been the pastor for a few months. One interesting side note, though, I did hear Michelle Obama favorably mentioned during the service. Although I might not have been able to directly study black pastoral political involvement, it isn't difficult to find examples elsewhere. Across the nation, there is a wide political spectrum among African American pastors. There are the Reverend Al Sharptons and Jesse Jacksons, who are as liberal and colorful as they come. Then there are the more moderates like Bishop Eddie Long, in opposition to gay rights and other anti-moral issues. Despite their obvious differences, R. Drew Smith, in the book Black Churches and Local Politics, says that the one thing most black ministers have in common is that they are unafraid to voice their opinion on both issues and candidates from the pulpit. Another important practice he mentioned is organized voter registration among members. These aspects form the separation between white pastors and black pastors that I've studied. Reverend Searing of Israel Gospel Baptist Church expressed, "For everybody who is black, the whole notion of separation of church and state does not exist." Honestly, I'm a bit surprised that they get away with so much endorsing candidates without fear of losing tax-exempt status. Maybe their passion scares away the opposition, or maybe it's merely because of race. I'm not sure. In contrast, my home church, Victory Harvest, is a majority white church with a white pastor who seems to be very politically involved. Of those polled, over 80% were said to have voted in the past 2 elections. The church is also home to several important political players, such as members of the Electoral College, actively involved campaigners, as well as the former head of Louisiana State Republican campaigning, Rhett Davis. Throughout the years, our church has been host to several members of Congress, including John Breaux, Tony Perkins, and most recently, Governor Jindal. Despite the rather Republican base in our church, Pastor Terry Workman is actually a registered Democrat, although he tells me he often votes Republican if the candidate's views are more closely aligned with Scripture. Workman is the one to never miss an election and always reminds his members to vote. He's also often heard bravely voicing his opinion from the pulpit, especially when it comes to abortion, homosexuality, and debt management. In fact, he also helped found and is the current board chair of the Crisis Pregnancy Center in Baton Rouge, which has saved over 55,000 children's lives in the last 28 years. Furthermore, he has been seen with other local pastors picketing numerous abortion clinics like Delta Women's Clinic. Pastor Terry is also very adamant in foreign affairs, seeing that his wife is Armenian. Maybe Pastor Terry is the outlier, but certainly he is an active player in the Baton Rouge community. Another white pastor I studied was Ken Schrader of Mandeville's First Baptist Church. I discovered that he too is very, quote, politically involved and is unafraid to voice his opinion in most cases. The only difference is that the Southern Baptist Convention has a rule against mentioning candidate names from the pulpit to avoid losing tax-exempt status.
Hey, I'm Ken Schrader.
Where are you the pastor, Mr. Schrader?
I am the pastor at Mandeville's First Baptist Church.
What party affiliation, if any, do you have?
I'm a registered Republican, have been for ever since I've been in Louisiana.
All right. Do you ever offer any sort of political opinion, whether economically or socially?
I will always offer an opinion if asked. Doesn't I enjoy the news. I enjoy political opinions and such. I read a lot and watch a lot. However, I limit the discussions to one-on-one or small groups. Don't use the pulpit for advancing political cause.
Cool. Pastor Ken gave me a whole new perspective. He reminded me that the supposed social political issues aren't even political, they are moral. Pastor Schrader is quick to point out that society has fabricated politics over issues that were never political until recently. He said politics is about candidates. As a pastor, I have the right and obligation to stand up for moral issues. Any moral issue, whether it has to do with the candidate or not, we're going to pull out all the stops. He has actually made national news on a few occasions for voicing his stance. In 2004, he and a coalition of parents vied against the pro-homosexual club at Fontainebleau High School in St. Tammany Parish. Pastor Ken argued that the club was approved on the false pretense that it was needed to counter bullying on campus. He said that parents and the school had the right to control the subject matter discussed on campus. In the end, the club was rejected. In another instance in 2009, Pastor Ken and 40 other local church leaders formed a coalition to fight Parish President Kevin Davis's proposal to establish a casino district near Slidell. He declared that it would be a contrast to the way of life of St. Tammany Parish and harm the fabric of the community. In the end, the pastors also won this fight, not long after when the parish president threw in the towel. From my experiences and research, I have found that the hypothesis is correct. Whether good or bad, black ministers seem to have more direct political influence on their members. But white pastors are becoming more politically involved due to the rise of moral issues. The white pastors I studied seemed to take a more active role in the community issues, while black pastors were more concentrated on affecting members through endorsements and voter registration.